Today's edition of People That Have Failed Me, USC. We'll talk about Michigan a little bit later too, because what a win by Washington and Jedd Fisch. Statement win for a guy who needed it. And a statement loss in the worst way for USC. 24-17. The offense sputters against Minnesota. Miller Moss throws a couple of interceptions, including the game clincher, and they lose to the Golden Gophers. The Golden Gophers, who anytime they've come up on the show this year, I've said I don't really know. I don't know what they are. I don't know. I don't know how to feel. That's a big win for PJ Fleck and company. Big win for PJ Fleck and company. It's as equally a devastating loss for USC. So they're done in the Big Ten. They are not going to have a Big Ten championship season. I thought they'd be 9-3 before the year. They could still accomplish that. Here's the problem, though. They still have to play Penn State, who they have at home next week. They still have to play Rutgers. They still have to play at Washington, which is clearly not an easy game. They still have to play Nebraska, and they have to play Notre Dame. They're going down in at least one of those football games. I think Lincoln Riley has a better football team this year than he did last year with Caleb Williams. That does not equate to he has the football team that USC fans expect to see when Lincoln Riley came over with all the hype, with all the money that he has paid. He hasn't delivered so far. The first season surpassed anyone's expectations that had them within reason. 11-1 from 4-8 the year prior. And it's not looking great. And here's the worst part for a lot of USC fans out there. Have you ever, ask yourself this if you're a Trojan fan, have you ever encountered, I sound like I'm reading an advertisement, have you ever encountered a situation, or like an ad for one of those class action lawsuits? Have you or a loved one been harmed by this? Well, here, this is what this is for USC. Have you or a loved one that's a Trojan fan run into the narrative that Michigan or teams like Michigan and Minnesota are too physical for USC and the Trojans are not strong enough to win in the Big Ten? Well, instead of saying you're in luck, you're out of luck right now, because Minnesota, oof, that's not a great Minnesota team. It's just not. It's just not. But USC, 17 points, gave up 193 yards on the ground. Darius Taylor goes for 144. The two losses that USC has had, they gave up 144 yards to Darius Taylor earlier today and 159 yards and a game-winning touchdown to Khalil Mullings. Now, is USC one play away in that Michigan game from having one loss and the season still out? Yeah, absolutely. But the schedule is too tough down the stretch. This was one that before the year and coming into this game, I had Sharpied in as a win for USC. Like, Michigan's not going to get, or Minnesota's not going to give them any problems. I mean, yeah, maybe they could lose to Michigan, but they're just not there. They're not there. They're not ready. I still think they're moving in the right direction. They have a chance to flip that narrative next week against Penn State. But I tell you what, that now becomes a glaring must-win game for Lincoln Riley amongst, at the very least, a certain subset of Trojan fans. There is a percentage of that fan base. I don't know what percentage. I don't have polling data. I could call Joey Lucas and ask her, but I don't have numbers. I just know that there are plenty of USC fans who say, hey, we're losing to Minnesota, Michigan, who just lost to Washington. That's in a complete reset year. That's the words of their head coach, by the way. That's a complete and total rebuild. Michigan that can only do one thing, literally just the one thing, which is, run inside zone. We can't beat them, and we didn't beat Minnesota. And then if you lose to Penn State, suddenly you have a 3-loss team. Everything started so well for Lincoln Riley and company this year. And I thought my faith in them was going to be rewarded. It still could be, but they can only lose one game the rest of the year for me to nail their preseason record prediction. And, oh boy, that is a bad loss. There is no way to spin it. There's no way to twist it. That's a bad loss for USC. Very bad loss. Now, let's talk about Michigan. I thought Michigan would split with these Pac-12 teams in my predictions. I just put the shoes on the wrong foot. Now, Michigan coming into the year, I heard from many Michigan fans out there, was just being overlooked and doubted and this and that and the other thing. And they have Illinois on the road next week, and I don't know if they're going to win. They certainly could. They're capable. But Michigan is a one-trick pony. I don't care who's playing quarterback. We've seen 3 different ones for the Wolverines. Why do you think Dave Portnoy said, I'll put $3 million up to go buy a quarterback in the portal, get somebody good? Because he knows the rest of the team is just fine. Edwards, 95 yards and a touchdown. Khalil Mullings held in check by this Washington defense. Steve Belichick and company did a phenomenal job. This is a big win for Washington. Big win for Washington here at home, top 10 victory. And look, Vegas tried to tell me the same thing they told me 2 years ago when Michigan State came to town. I didn't want to believe them. I thought Michigan would win in the trenches because that's how I felt about this game going into the year, and I didn't think that had really changed. And Michigan, under 5 yards a carry. Now, for most teams, 174 yards on the ground to 4.7 per touch is pretty good. That's never good enough when you can't even throw for 150 yards. The passing game is inept, and Michigan has been exposed. And they have lost their second game. It's only their first in conference, but Michigan, they're not doing anything in the Big Ten title picture either. They've still got to play Illinois. They've still got to play Oregon. They've still got to play Indiana. And they've still got to play Ohio State. 3 of those 4 games are on the road. They looked a little easier coming into the season. How do they feel right about now? How do they feel right about now with Michigan's one way, and literally one way? There is just nothing. I have never seen a team I've seen teams that are a quarterback away, but not to this extent, where you look up and go, wow, how good was J.J. McCarthy? Wow, how bad is this passing game that you can't even hit 200 yards? Did you know Ashton Genty's rushing prop was over 100 yards higher than Alex Orji's passing prop in this game? By the way, Orji probably went under that number because Michigan went for, Orji went 3 of 7 for 15 yards. Yeah. And Jack Tuttle comes into the game, 10 of 18, 98 yards, touchdown and a pick. Wow, where have I seen that before? It's just a revolving door. It's the Three Stooges of quarterbacks when it comes to throwing. Michigan can run the ball. Congratulations. Turns out when the defense doesn't score, Michigan isn't that good. And they are good when the defense does score. They scored against Fresno State. They scored against USC. And here they are not scoring against Texas, not scoring against Washington, and they lose the football game. Because if the defense doesn't play perfectly, then the offense has no hope of keeping up. So Michigan, USC, pretty brutal losses here. And I didn't think either was making the Big Ten championship game before the year. I think both fan bases can say, okay, let's look ahead at what we can feel good about going forward. Because USC, they're not running the table. Michigan, they're losing at least one more time, if not twice, because Indiana's a real football team. Illinois is a real football team. We know Ohio State and Oregon are really good. That's College Game Day next week in Eugene. So craziness in the Big Ten, craziness everywhere in college football. It's a beautiful game. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, which is going to be really, really soon once the Miami game wraps up. Until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.